Right, so when we're looking at electricity, the main thing that you're going to be asked to do, if it does come up in the Leaving Cert, is to draw a single line diagram to show just the layout of how the wiring is done in a house. So the usual way they ask that is either to draw a lighting system or to draw a system for the sockets in the walls. But both systems operate under the same kind of scheme. So it's very similar to the plumbing question in that the basic system or the basic kind of theory behind it is this loop system, that wherever something goes, it has to return back to where it started originally. So when power goes to something, it has to be brought back in the same way as well. Your starting point for your electricity for a domestic house is going to be the main consumer unit at the back of the house, which is usually more commonly known as the fuse board. So all of you would have a fuse board at home, but the technical term I suppose you would use would be the consumer unit. Now that's going to be the first port of call. So basically what you have is you have your main supply from outside coming into the consumer units, the first stop on the way into the house. Now you also know at this stage you have three different wires that you deal with when you're talking about electricity. You have the live wire, the neutral wire and the earth wire. The live wire is the one that actually brings the current to the appliance, and we're going to do it for light switches in this case. The neutral wire is the wire that brings the power back to where it actually started, so that's what actually completes the loop. And the earth wire is for safety feature, which we'll talk about later on. So we start our single line diagram by drawing our consumer unit, and what I'm going to put in is I'm going to put in two ceiling roses. The ceiling rose is just the thing that actually is on the ceiling that the light bulb is plugged into, so they're kind of circular in shape. And obviously we need a switch for the light as well, so we'll put a switch for each of those ceiling roses. Label up what we've just drawn, and our switch. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll draw one of the switches in the on position. So when the switch is in the on position, the little bar that's on the inside of it is horizontal. When the switch is in the off position, the little bar that's inside the switch will be either lifted upwards or downwards, whichever way it's directed. Okay, so I might just explain that. That's the on position, that's the off position. Now the way the lighting system will be done is that first of all we start off with the live wire, and this is the best way of drawing it. So our live wire is going to leave from our consumer unit. This will be wired throughout the whole, through the walls and the ceiling or whatever else is hidden from view. So the live wire leaves and travels down along the system. Now again we said the live wire is the one that actually brings the power to the units. So if you need a safety feature, it's going to go on the live wire, and usually the safety feature is your main fuse. So if your main fuse blows for any reason, it's going to cut out the live wire supply, therefore cutting the supply of electricity straight away. Now your live wire is going to be wired up to the light switch itself, not the bulb. So it's wired up to the light switch. So we're going to put it to both of those. And then the switch is wired to the ceiling rose. So you have another live wire coming out, and you connect it up like so. So if you ever open up the inside of a switch, you'll see the different ports that you can plug wires into. You see the extra wires coming out. But basically the live wire from the consumer unit goes to the switch, then there's a separate wire going from the switch to the actual light bulb itself. Now that's the power being brought to the units, but as they are, they wouldn't work because there's no loop system being evolved yet. So to complete the loop system, you need to have your neutral wire, and it works in exactly the same way. It starts off from the consumer unit, comes downwards, travels along the system, and then we wire it up in exactly the same way. So the neutral wire is wired up to the switch, in both cases. And then from the switch, it's wired to the ceiling rose. Yeah. Now hopefully you'll be able to figure out why this would be the on switch with the power working and why this would be the light switch in the off position. The reason is because that little bar that's inside the switch is made of metal, and what that's doing is it's completing the circuit. But when the bar is lifted up, there's a break in the circuit, therefore on this side the loop is actually broken, therefore the light won't work. In this system here, the bar is connecting the live and the neutral wires, therefore you have a full loop and the light switch turns on. The only other thing you have to worry about is the earth wire. Now the earth wire is just for a safety feature, there's no other purpose for it, and there should never actually be any current passing through the live wire. If there is, there's something wrong. The purpose of the live wire is the way electricity behaves, it always wants to travel into the ground. It wants to find the quickest route possible into the ground. That's why if you got electrocuted and there wasn't any live wire, if you were standing on the ground and you touched something that was live, you're the link between that unit and the ground. That's why the electricity passes through you, and that's why you would get electrocuted. The live wire is going to act as that quickest route, so even if you did touch something that was live, you're not going to get electrocuted. That's why if you'd notice, there's a kind of an urban myth, but if crows land on electrical wires, the ones you see out in fields, they don't get electrocuted. And the reason is because they're not standing on the ground. So you won't actually get electrocuted if you're not standing on the ground. Now I wouldn't try it out, but still in all, in theory it wouldn't work. So the live wire is going to act, it goes from the consumer unit along the system the same as the live and the neutral. So we're going to draw our earth wire. I'll put it as a broken line just so it's different. And it travels along like so. And every appliance that it passes by, whether it be a light switch or the main socket for the walls or whatever, it's going to be wired up to them. So we're going to have an earth wire passing from the switch over the mains earth wire up as far as the ceiling rose in both circumstances. So if either of those, the actual ceiling rose or the light switch, ever became live, it would just go into the main earth wire and travel outside. So it goes back to the consumer unit. That's your fuse box, your main fuse box, usually at the back of the house. And from that consumer unit, there's usually a wire or a peg that's driven underground when you're actually in the first phases of construction of the house. And that's the end point of your earth wire. Okay, so that's your safety. So the whole thing is just a loop system, constantly going around in a loop. The live wire brings the power, the neutral wire returns it, the earth wire is just for safety. Try and use coloured pens when you can. I didn't have them today. If you are stuck, use the same colour but label them, make sure it's obvious, or use the broken line to kind of make it obvious it's a different sort of a wiring system.